joke is Trinidad is not a real place. And sometimes we just run into situations where we can't help this, even if we dislike the joke, the implications of the joke. And I spoke spoke about this to my colleague recently, Mark Anthony Peter. The fact that, we can't celebrate our successes, but we celebrate the absurdity of our reality at times. Almost like if we're proud of it. We now live in a country where someone who gave a gift to the prime minister, which was large enough to cause it to come under scrutiny by the Integrity Commission 3 times, and then something happened and the head of the commission changed, something like that. I can't remember the details. That same person is now claiming that agents of the state out to get him, all the while enjoying support from other arms of the state. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a potential alleged financier or backer of an administration who is still in power. The politicians that one assumes he supports in whichever way he supports them is still in power. He is then claiming to be persecuted by said state, by which his friend is the prime minister. Only in Trinidad, I guess. We can't just have normal controversies. We have to have these S-bends in our controversies for them to make no sense. How could this even come to pass? It's incredible. And just curiosity alone, I would love to find out the details. But I do wonder if it says something about us, where now even the absurd kind of just passes us by and we don't really respond to it. Or maybe, and this is a phenomenon I've seen abroad, when things become too absurd, people don't even know what to make of it, so they don't take it on. And then to what extent has our wider politics basically become that? It's just so absurd that the everyday citizen that has too much on their plate already doesn't necessarily care to take on anymore. Now, we have an election coming up, and the closer we come to the election, the more difficult it might seem to appear objective, depending on who it is you're being listened to, watched by. Because if you criticize the government, PNM supporters will say, you're against the PNM, you're biased, you hate them, you hate us. If you don't criticize the government enough, UNC supporters will say, you're biased, you hate them, you hate us. Them as in the politicians, us as in the voters. But one of the things that I do find alarming, and it's an observation I pointed out before, and I do wonder to what extent, because I can't speak on this on other parties, because they themselves have not been in the position that the PNM is in now. But I've noticed that it seems as though members of the administration don't truly understand what it means to be in public office, because it's almost like if they want to act like if they're still in private practice. And the same justification that they would use to deny us information is forgotten when they need information. All right. And also they forget they're public persons. The requirements that comes with that, the cost of that is not something, they cannot just say, I am only human and leave it there, but want to enjoy the perks of being a public person, of holding public office. And maybe as in other things, the other political parties will show us that it's not just the PNM, they themselves will do it as well for whatever reason. Politicians seem to like to bring themselves down to the lowest common denominator in many an issue or in many a modus operandi. But at what point will we find politicians or political candidates in this country who will understand this phrase and its many, if subtle, implications? When a man assumes a public trust, he should consider himself a public property. Thomas Jefferson said that. Translated to 2024, when a man or woman assumes a public trust, he should consider himself a public property. And public office is supposed to be a public trust. The office of the Prime Minister, Minister of whichever portfolio, that's not owned by you. Even a political party is not owned by you. At least a proper political party is not supposed to be owned. Those who know which party is owned will know. You hold office for a time because you were selected and people put their faith in you, and you bear the responsibility of the nation. And what is required of those who bear that responsibility is not doing reasonably well for the average citizen. Really and truly, what a nation deserves out of all of its leaders, and it might seem unreasonable, but when you think about it, it's not. Every nation deserves exceptional performance because the costs of anything average or less than average, and some might argue what we have is less than average or worse, the cost to a nation is the well-being of its people, the opportunity cost of what could have been if only we were able to pick someone better. But therein lies the issue. How do we properly ascertain who will acknowledge the fact that once they get into public office, it's not about them, and their life until they leave office is not their own? Yes, of course, you don't burn yourself out. But the flip side is one must wonder, how many rounds of golf is reasonable? And how many rounds of golf is it being self-centered? Sure, Michael Small here, still on the Sister Isle, sheltering from the mosquito menace that is plaguing not just TNT, from what I understand, but the show must go on. We do have the good lady later on in the show, but let's try to get through some topics in today's daily review. And of course, the first story, top story, it's at least one morning paper's front page story, I believe. Flooding. Flooding that happened yesterday. I believe it was the night before. It hit south, rains the night before, flooded out south. And then yesterday afternoon, so half a day to a day later, it hit northern Trinidad. And of course, I do wonder, the first thing that comes to mind is, will the Minister of Public Utilities give us an update on the level of our reservoirs? Because I'm curious if even with North and South Trinidad flooding, somehow the reservoirs still are below the level, the average level of water that we would need it to be in order to comfortably feel secure that we'll have consistent water going forward. And it goes back to a couple of long-term issues with regards to what's going on. Now, criticisms has already come in about canals not being cleaned and inadequate maintenance, insufficient clearing of major water courses. One of the things that I saw this morning is, in some cases, even if it's a natural water course, you might still dig it out, line it with concrete in order to ensure efficient flow of water. Is that something that we should be looking to be doing? Yes, I know concrete, destroying green spaces, but at the end of the day, I think even if we dig out new channels, I'm still waiting on the potential, at least examination of an infrastructure project that will see the building of new canals that could, one, take in the flood water and hopefully the rainwater, hopefully preventing it from being flood water, and then drain it, one would assume, to the sea. Given the size of the country and the situation, I don't think it would be responsible to drain it to a natural water course that could just lead to flooding elsewhere, unless it's going to like Carney Swamp or something like that, or a lagoon. But take it to the sea, have a full canal, and I don't know geologically if it's even viable. That's why I said, where's the examination into these things? Into building canals that might lead into new reservoirs that could then be sources of water. Two birds with one stone. I've been saying this before. Because outside of the usual, and we hear this all the time, the problem is inadequate maintenance, insufficient clearing. That assumes that we have enough drainage capacity. Fact of the matter is, I think that ship has sailed in Port of Spain. It's not just about clearing the drains in Port of Spain. If anyone thinks, oh, Port of Spain flood because the drains are clear, that's not just it. It can't be every time the drains are that clogged. And there are other parts in the country where it's suburban. And even then, it's, one could argue it's rural and it's flooding. So what is it about what we built without necessarily considering drainage? What did we do to mess it up? Or were those areas always flood prone? Either way, where was the planning involved? I don't really hear anyone else pushing for any larger long-term scale solutions to our flood situation. And that's kind of disappointing. The opposition says the same thing all the time. That's cool. Other critics say the same thing all the time. It's seemingly that's cool. And so what? Meanwhile, I don't know how many people lost thousands of dollars in property yesterday at a time when the economy is not doing very well. The private sector, at the very least, does not have the power of the various unions for the public sector to even get a 2% increase, much less a 4%. So can people afford the flood damage as time goes on? Somehow we'll manage, right? God is a trinity. It's almost like if I can't escape it if I want to. But going back to crime, next story. Commissioner of Police had a media conference, outlined some targets, and I wanted to address it now. 30% reduction in violent crime, 25% detection for homicides, 15% increase in retrieval of firearms, 15% reduction in serious crimes, 10% reduction in homicide, 20% reduction in, well, in violent crimes, which, according to the coach, he said reduction in violent crimes twice, saying 30% and 20%. So I'm not entirely sure which one was her error. That's the first point. The second one is 10% reduction in homicide. On one hand, if she goes too far, like she did in the first GSC that she appeared in, she'll be criticized, and rightfully so. She can't make promises she can't keep. On the other hand, is 10% satisfactory to the population? To some extent, it might just be reasonable, because even with a 30 murder reduction between the record-breaking year and last year, it reduced by about 30 or maybe 28. That's not, I don't think that's a percent. That's not 10%. That might be 5%, give or take. A 10% reduction would actually potentially start a trend. We would have a 3-year sample size, very small, of the murder rate annually going down. Is that good enough? I'm not entirely sure. More on that in a little bit. But the commissioner did point to, it looks like word salad. It sounds like word salad. I don't know to what extent this is just lip service. Building legitimacy and public trust and confidence, increasing police presence and visibility, because that's always works. Improving the quality of the police response, that would be welcome. I wonder how you would manage that. Increasing accountability through greater supervision and management of police operations. It's kind of frightening to say that there's significant room to improve that. Improving roadway management, exhibiting zero tolerance position and police indiscipline I think it's for police indiscipline and corruption, promoting positive public messaging and focusing on cyber crimes. All of these things are good. And also the same things that people are clamoring for. Dismantling of criminal grounds, retrieval of illegal firearms, eradication of drug blocks, increased focus on transnational crime, enhancing our intelligence capability, leveraging the use of technology. Good luck with that. With regards to the members assenting to that, some of these work to rule things, the police are not immune. So she said all the right things, but I'll just remind people that we kind of supposedly hit the panic button years ago. What was new now? And at the end of the day, this isn't a plan. We have goals and we have aims. Goals as in this actual percentage figures to aim towards, but then also there's things in general that we would like to achieve. But how will it be achieved? Because we've already heard similar things with the redoubling of our efforts, and ultimately speaking, a lot of this is just that, redoubling of our efforts. I've seen one person on social media, one person speaking to media on social media, basically calling out the commissioner, saying, look, maybe you should step down. The gentleman basically laid it out plain. At what point are we going to look at the job performance and say it's fine? You know, maybe next year. It's almost like if this is a sports team and we're treating it as though we didn't win the championship. Well, maybe, you know, there's always next year. There's always next year to reduce crime. All right. I don't want to, we'll leave that there because the good lady herself is here, not her usual day, but she's here to speak about something that ties into some of what I said at the start of the show. So stay tuned to Talking Point at WSN. We'll be right back with Karen Esishera after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Coming soon to WESN.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services, yeah.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren. Coming soon to WESN.
And we're back here on Talking About WSN, the Content Capital Show. Michael Small, joined by the good lady herself from our studios in Gattaca Street, Woodbrook, Kindness Sheriff, former Minister of Finance and attorney at law. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Sean. Good to be with you and with your audience. I meet so many of them just like you, and they're so positive and so encouraging, and I want to thank them, and they always have very positive things to say about the show. And I think they find it very, I think the main thing I've heard is they find it deals with the issues in an objective way, as much as one can do that given information that you would or would not be able to access,
Well, Karen, it's funny because I myself actually, we do try to be objective, but
yes.
I myself, this week,
yes,
it's hard for me not to feel down and
yes.
to be pessimistic. And I find this week it's even harder to feel that I'm objective, because at the end of the day, and to some extent, the opposition is not in power. They don't make policy, so there isn't that much to criticize. They just have their role. Are they doing their role well or not? I would say no. Some people would say yes, but that's all you could do. The government now putting out policy, they're in charge of governance of running a country. There are a lot of things, especially in the last 2 years, it seems, Karen, there's been less positive things to say about the government, more negative things to say about the government. We're coming up to the election year. I do honestly feel as though, I actually don't like being in this position where I am just criticizing the administration, seemingly now, just about every day. But at the same time, I can't lie to myself and pull the wool over my eyes and say, oh, it's fine, there's nothing to see here, for the sake of trying to appear to be balanced. I can't just muzzle myself and ignore things that I think are bad signs and bad indicators.
Well, I think maybe what I should have said more in line with what I was saying was that, because there's pressure on the media, and we're seeing that with the OCM issue, because there's pressure on the media, and then you have this Sedition Act being pulled out, and other things that can erode persons' ability and willingness to speak out. I said that in the context of using a factual matrix to make your comments. You're not saying things in a subjective way. You're not pulling things out of a hat and taking a position, and you're not supporting it with evidence. And when I say evidence, with the facts that are available to you. And as you said, yes, if the other party were in power, we would have a lot to say about them because they're the ones who will be making policies. And as we have already said before on other shows, the difference between the executive and legislative in our small countries where most of the persons who sit in the parliament are cabinet ministers who have senior positions. There's little distinction or that separation of power where you have in England where they have 650 MPs and only about 15 cabinet ministers. But I don't want to go down that road, only just to say that the media is like called the fourth estate, and all you are doing is bringing the facts to the people as best you can and allowing them to form an opinion, which is what I try to do when I come on. And that's what you do. It's not against anyone. It's about love of country, and so that's the.
Well, you have an interesting take this morning.
Yes.
And I think it does line up. It does line up or agree with some of the things I've already said this week. But you went a step further with regards to the sort of the social contract that a government has with its people and a people has with its government, and the fact that right now it seems as though there's a breakdown in trust, and without trust, that foundation is shaky at best or non-existent at worst.
Right. So that's exactly what. So you may find that I would be referring to matters that we've discussed previously. But we're looking at it as Sean has indicated. So Sean and I speak about, we're very responsible about my coming on and agreeing about the topic. And, we have to agree on because we want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and being fair in our reporting. So yes, we did speak about it. And what really triggered it? Well, first of all, I wanted to say which goes in, and then I'll give a definition of what trust is, and then I'll give the examples, some of which we have looked at, but I'm looking at it from the perspective of the issue of trust in a government and what it means, and then look at the examples. So I want to say first that the Mannequin gas field, Shell made a final investment decision. But, it's one of the cross-border gas fields, but the Mannequin part is the part that is in our territorial waters, and therefore you do not need, which is what my point is, and also the other one with BPTT, which is also another Mannequin. Sorry, it's Manatee I meant. Manatee is the one that they gave the final investment decision, Shell. So that one has gone forward, and that is also a cross-border with Lauren Manatee. The one I was also referring to is another cross-border, but this is with BPTT, Mannequin Coquina. Similarly, the BPTT has indicated that it is prepared to, to go forward with monetizing the natural gas. Now, why have I bringing that up? Because whilst I commend the government and the minister for getting a final investment decision from Shell in regard to the Manatee, which is Lauren Manatee, most of which is in the Venezuela side, but it's over 2 trillion cubic feet on our side. What I find, and I asked other people to make sure that I wasn't being, being unfair or being objective, the government has spent a tremendous amount of time, in my view and others, and this is just an opinion, to make us feel that it's just a matter of time. And the Dragon Field was always put up front as the provider of the natural gas, and that we were on the cusp of making it happen. And the issue about the license from Venezuela was made a lot was made of it. But what I find that is disappointing and goes to the issue of trust, I have spoken about it, is OFAC. America, that is why Shell has not, to my knowledge, up to now, given a final investment decision on Dragon Field, because all the gas is in Venezuela. And as I said, Biden, and it looks like the elections are due November the 4th this year, and from all indications, it may be that Trump really may win. And Trump has been taking a very robust anti-Venezuela position. So this Manatee OFAC 2-year license was to allow us to pay for the gas in cash, so that in a sense Venezuela would get money, which is what they've been trying to, one of the sanctions against them. But we're nearly at the end. In the next year or less, it's coming to an end, and Shell has not made a decision. And you knew that. You knew that. And I felt it was incumbent upon the government to be more transparent with the people, and it seemed like you were taking down a route. I mean, you're learning the real position from international journalists, Reuters or Reuters, however you pronounce it, and Bloomberg and other entities, and not from your minister, you know. And he knew that the Dragon field was unlikely. I want it to happen, but the reality is that Manatee and the BPTT, which is part of the cross-border, I mean, there's gas fields in our waters, of which America would have no objection because it's not giving anything to Venezuela. It's helping the LNG and it's helping the downstream industries. And I feel that the minister has not been forthright with the country in relation to the prospects that they've been talking, at least this administration, talking at least 2018, 2020, you know, and bigging it up, for want of a better expression, and not being forthright with the people. So that brings me really to what I consider that is, whilst I give the praise on one hand, and I'm sure they were working on it behind the scenes, I think the Dragon field was an example of a lack of transparency, a lack of the trust and confidence that the people must have. And in fact, I looked it up. OECD, which is an international organization of economic cooperation and development, I got their definition of trust and confidence when it deals with government. And it says it's the cornerstone of what is the social contract of our government with its citizenry. Trust in that context is the government's representation, that the government represents the confidence of the citizens and the business in the actions of the government to do what it is right and fair. It is one of the most important foundations in which legitimacy and sustainability of political systems are built. It is essential for social cohesion and, in fact, the ability of a government to govern. So there are high-trust countries like Norway and Sweden. So that brings me to the question, why would I say, and I actually today, rather than speak of it from my own words, use some of the articles in the newspaper that talk about some of the issues which we have looked at. And one of them came from CNC3, greater transparency needed with withdrawal from HSF. Now, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, you know, I had always questioned why did the minister put the natural gas at $5? I mean, it was so it was so not related to anything that was happening in the international market, and still is. It's too something. I know you can make, it's not so simple, there's all kinds of, it's not that straightforward, but $5 was, it was really an extreme amount, and there was no explanation. And what they're saying in the, this is an editorial from The Guardian, he said the decision of the Ministry of Finance to access US $160 million, which is $1.9 billion, from the Heritage Stabilization Fund on December 18, 2023, may have come as a surprise to many citizens. They're not questioning that the minister has a right to do that, because under Section 15 of the Heritage Stabilization Fund, if your revenue position or your revenue expectation for petroleum, and under HSF, natural gas is considered as petroleum in a gaseous state. So it is a petroleum. If it falls below 10%, it does allow for the government to, if it falls below that, for the government to withdraw funds from the HSF. That is a fact. But what they are saying is that the HSF Act provides for the central bank as the manager of the fund. One of the responsibilities of the bank is outlined in the schedule to the Act. And the fund, not later than 1 month after the end of each quarter, should reveal that. And what the criticism is that the minister had to have known what the position was and that he had withdrawn the money, and he said nothing about it at all. And that the only time we learned about it is when the HSF published their report in mid-January 20. Oh, I said the difference between, right? The difference between the country knowing that a withdrawal of $160 million was made from the HSF in mid-January 2024 as opposed to mid-June 2024 is that the population would have been aware 5 months earlier that there was a shortfall in petroleum revenue for the 2023 fiscal year. So there is that explanation from one of the newspapers about the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, the lack of letting the public know what the position was. And what bothered me a little bit is that, again, you know, looking at it, is I looked at the amendment that was made to the Heritage and Civilization the Heritage and Civilization Fund Act, among other acts, 9 of 2020. But what bothered me is that among the changes, and this is what perhaps I don't understand it, the Heritage and Civilization Fund is amended to, it included where there's likely to be a precipitous decline in budgeted revenues which are based on the production or price of crude oil or natural gas, right? They allow you to take it, but where the withdrawal is made, this is 2.3 of the Act, where withdrawal has been made from the fund under this section, which means what I just read out to you just now. Under this section, the minister shall cause a report to be laid to the House of Representatives within 60 days of that withdrawal. I don't think he did that. And the fact that he says that the deficit is not going to be 5 billion, but it's going to be more than 9 billion, and he took out 2.3 billion out of the consolidated fund, I guess, to reduce the deficit, means that he knew quite a long time ago, and he said what was the reason, the precipitous decline in the price of natural gas, right? And yet we have this act that says that if you know that, you should have come to the parliament. This is what it says, where withdrawal has been made, and he made the withdrawal under this section, the minister shall cause a report to be laid in the House of Representatives within 60 days of that withdrawal. And he, as far as I'm concerned, he knew that what was going on. He knew that certainly by the mid-year review in June, and he said not a word. And the way we learned about it is when the HSF is in their quarterly review then let us know that's about 5 or 6 months earlier that the minister had withdrawn the equivalent of 1 billion TT for that very reason, right? So that doesn't help with each thing. So I just will leave that point to a thing, and maybe I find it so amazing what I'm saying to you. I can't even believe what I'm telling you. I really can't believe what I just told you, because I can't believe that there's something clearly stated in that Act 9 of 2020 that says that you should do that. He tells you that and did not lay something before the Parliament within 60 days of knowing that. So maybe there's something I am not getting. The other thing which goes again to this issue of the trust is where you are now, Sean, in Tobago, and the headline was, "Pay me before I dead." Now the issue is the fisher folk are not, you know, I don't mean to be disparaging at all. Everybody has different, but I don't know how many of them are, you know, tertiary level, and even if they are, it doesn't. I mean, you have to take the point of view that they would find it challenging for the kinds of requirements that are being put on them in order to make a claim. And the fisher folk, I'm pulling it up, they had a meeting on February 7th, ended in frustration and anger. And what they're saying is, this is a fisherwoman, I use her language, or they better give me my money before I dead. Pay me before I dead. Don't wait until 5, 6, 10 years going down the line and fishermen still struggling here, we can't get nothing. And that is because they said that the claims had to be submitted by July the 22nd. But from what I understand, the claims were so, what they're saying, the fishermen argued that the process was burdened with unrealistic demands and excessive red tape, making it nearly impossible to access the promised compensation. You know, does that, I mean, these people are suffering. That is this is not something they're doing on the side. These are not people who have a job that pays them X amount. They are relying on their livelihood is from fishing, and you are asking from them something that they are saying it is unrealistic, and it's almost as if, I'm not saying it is, but certainly they feel so, and this is the whole issue of trust. It comes across as you are saying, yes, we're going to give you, but you have to do this, and when you do this, you know they can't, many of them wouldn't be able to fulfill your requirements, especially they're simple folk, and this is their life. And that oil spill, they didn't cause it. I'm sure they've gotten money from, I believe, not only from Central, but I think they've gotten other monies. I may be wrong about that. And these people are still suffering and no compensation. So again, this is an example where it does not inspire confidence. It does not inspire confidence in the government. So I dealt with the HSF issue. I've dealt with the issue with the oil spill. And I come back to Paria. And this is taking these articles out of the papers. So I'm not me, I'm taking it from the papers. And the article said the silence of Paria. That was the article. And it was written on May the 17th, 2024. And what they're saying is that they're calling on Paria Fuel Trading Company to move to settle outstanding compensation to families of the 4 deceased drivers and the lone survivor, Christopher Boudram. But no contact has since been made with the families, the newspaper was told, and Paria has not released any information on the status of the compensation. How could that be right? How could that be right? I had already expressed the view that Paria Trading should not, the company should not be the one to determine the compensation, mainly because the loan commissioner in the matter, at least on the other count, the first count, he found both the independent contractor and Paria liable. But on the second count of this, it's legislation in the United States where they talk about, it's not only called negligence, it's also called manslaughter. It's called, but I think it's in a company, so you can't put a company in jail, right? But what disturbed me was that when the loan commissioner said, with regard to the second issue, where they said they not only did not allow, no efforts were made to rescue the fishermen, the divers from the sea line when Christopher Boudram came up and said they were still alive, but according to the report, from the commissioner's report, the independent contractor was prevented from trying to do anything to try to rescue his workers. So the only lone persons found responsible under this, on that end of the negligence was Paria. And yet Paria was elected by, or selected by the Prime Minister to deal with compensation. It's over 2.5 years. And these people, I just read it from the papers, I didn't make this up. I am so far no word from Paria. We are hoping it happens soon. This is May 2024, you know, and you can't help but say that this does not inspire confidence. One, giving the responsibility to Paria, and secondly, they're saying you're not even communicating with us. How is that right? How is that right? And now they've taken Paria to court. OSHA has been taken to court, some of their senior members to court for breach of OSHA legislation. How could this be right? You know, does that make you have confidence in the government, that the government cares? The government is there, a social contract with you. They don't own these things. Paria doesn't belong to the government, you know. All these things that they're holding over, you know, they don't own it, you know. They're there to look after your interest. And when these things happen back to back to back to back, it really makes you wonder. And the other one that I'm bringing up again is the CLICO sale. And this is not my words, because I was very careful this time around to say, I'm not going to say what I said. I get my information from what I read in the papers, right? And I haven't heard anyone say that, that what I'm saying is not right. And in another article, from one of the main daily newspapers, CLICO auditors denied access to methanol holdings information. And that was and that is saying not only for 2023, for 2021 and 2022, the KPMG and internationally, yes, the internationally recognized auditing company, so it's not some fly-by-night auditing company, added, this is what they have said, I'm quoting from them, we were denied access to the necessary audit working papers and group reporting from the subsidiary in order to allow us to complete the required audited procedure. So they put a disclaimer when the minister announced that they had sold, which this was part of the winding up of CL Financial, which is, I may have been the minister then, but I could tell you I was out since 2010. And much of what was done, I do not agree with, but that's not for me to say at this point. I'm not in government, and they're in government. But what I'm saying, CLICO sold its entire 56.53% of Methanol Holdings, which is located in Oman, to the Switzerland-based Proman Group. This is the same Proman Group that the Court of Appeal determined that they had committed fraud. This is the same Proman Group that the Court of Appeal said they owe over 139 million US in dividend payments. This is the same Proman Group that the Court of Appeal has said that the payment of 46.5 million is a gross understatement of the value of the shares. That they must pay them back the correct amount of the value of those shares. This is the same Proman Group. This is the same Proman Group that the government said that they were going in January. That Proman was going in January to challenge the decision, and yet we read this from the KMG. This is what it says in CLICO 2023 financials. KPMG issued a disclaimer of opinion based on its ability, quote unquote, to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence on the financial information provided by CL World Brands because we were denied access to the management and the auditors of CL World Brands and associates of CLICO. The auditing firm refused to provide an opinion on CL World Brands. But this is also CLICO. So how do you have confidence in a government like this? How do you have confidence in a government? And let me just end with what they said. CLICO sold its shares since December 22nd, 2023 for 2.35 billion TT in a transaction that was first reported in The Guardian in December 2024. So a year had passed and nobody knew. Well, it wasn't made public, right? And that's the whole thing about trust. That is just the role of a government. So I dealt with the CLICO and disclaimer, which is not my words. These are not my words. This is coming from the newspapers, and respected newspapers. And then you're talking about this thing with OCM. OCM is a major, like what you call the fourth estate. And one of the things you want to ensure that a democracy is separation of powers, the Westminster model. We really don't have that because I've said that already, but we have it with the judiciary. It's really what we have to rely on. Not because the government created that as what we inherited, and but it has been criticized since the Wooding Commission that our model does not work for Trinidad. But I'm not going to go through that again. But the point about it is they are talking about the NIF questions OCM vote. Because the government who acquired shares, OCM is I-95.5, Trinidad Express, TV6, I think there's something other, another Greendot. But we all know that TV6 is highly respected in this country, or was highly respected as being seen as being really one of the more independent voices. I-95 was at one time, but now it seems that it's a mouthpiece for the government. So it comes across, although they may deny it, but the facts appear to say otherwise. And TV6, I don't know, I don't follow all the local media, but I know that the TV6 is one of the well-respected local television stations. And they wanted to include 2 new directors. Okay. And one of them, why do you want to do that? Directors, that alone, why you want to increase your directorship on this board when the media plays such an important role in a democratic, any democracy? That's like what they call the fourth estate. But not only have you gotten the decision that both of the appointees were not, the shareholders did not agree to them becoming directors. And OCM has declared that the shares, those shares were acquired by the bailout. So it's not that the government invested, they got it through the CLICO bailout, maybe. Anyway, and the point is that they voted on it, and they had a very highly, according to the report, a highly respected auditor, or whoever it was, oversee the voting. And yet, after that, you won't accept that. And I'm reading from the report. One day after shareholders of One Caribbean Media rejected the election of 2 government-nominated directors to the media company board, the NIF holding company has submitted a legal request for information on the vote. They want to know, they sent it through their lawyer, senior counsel, and they want the results. Anyway, the results showed what it showed. But from my understanding, the letter wants, they're requesting this information. NIF is requesting the following information: the names of the Series A shareholders, the names of the Series B shareholders, the number of Series A shareholders who voted at the annual meeting held on July 11, 2024, the number of Series B shareholders who voted at the AGM, the number of shareholders who submitted proxy forms to authorize the chairman of the meeting to vote for them. And it ended the letter, this is from NIF's representative, which is essentially the government. Further, NIF requests inspection of OCM's share register that was utilized for the AGM, the record of the votes cast at the meeting, and the proxy form and identification documents were provided the persons who submitted proxy form. What is that about? Well, on the face of it, it looked like you want to know who voted against you, so you'll know how to deal with them. It reminds you of what happened when we had that internal election for the head of the PNM, which I had unsuccessfully challenged, but where it was shown that when persons went to vote, when people went to vote, and they voted as number 25 or number 26 or whatever they voted as, the number was put on the ballot vote thing, the number, so that it would allow the government, because it was the party, to see if who number 26 was, and if number 26 really voted as they said. That's the only explanation, because they did admit that they did require that, because we wrote them. This is looking like the same kind of bullying. You know, you don't vote for us, we're going to find out now who didn't vote for us, who said they were going to vote for us, and you're going to pay a price. You're going to pay a price. Because most of the people who voted in internal elections, by the way, was less than half that voted when Penny Beckett, when we were in opposition. They got less than half, and the Prime Minister got a few hundred votes in his own constituency, right? I don't want to, prosecute that matter, but the whole way that they went about it, putting the number on the polling thing that you put in, so you could recheck it, you could check 25 against the person, and then you'd be able to know who they voted for. And these were mostly, from my understanding, from what I saw, were people who worked in CPEP and URP, and people who, you can make your own accommodation as to the vote, because it was half of what voted in the election with Penny. Half. And there were more members of the party when that election took place. It gave me and then you have the SSA matter. When the Prime Minister stood up in Parliament and, put fear, including in me, I said. But what he didn't do is when he said the buildup of ammunition, the buildup of guns, the buildup, and then he says they wanted to disrupt the government. Anyway, he may not have used the word coup, but he was effectively saying that they were building up ammunition and guns, and the clear intention was that they caught them in the right time, and there was a cult in the thing, and putting fear in the country. Why he didn't say the Komodo camp was closed down and thousands of ammunition and guns were moved to SSA, and that the SSA was used as a training ground by national security, which would have explained to a large extent the number of guns and amount of ammunition. But no, you left that out. What you said is you gave all that, but you didn't mention that, and then you added that there was also I don't know if you use a certain word like plot, but giving the impression there was a plan to remove the government. How you could be so irresponsible? Am I going to trust your word? I can't trust you. And the final matter, which I am going to end with, and all of this is the issue of trust, is the sale of the refinery. Now, I have spoken about it already, but the real issue, which I had not appreciated until I had a guest, I think I can call his name because I don't think he has spoken out on it, and he was on air and spoke on it. On a show that I do, David Abdullah was the guest, so I think he is a good source to put some value to what he's saying. What he said is that, and I think the Patriots have said that, and JTAM and all of them have said that the closing date for bids for the refinery was May the 10th, 2024. This is the point that he was making. And the Prime Minister met with this, what's his name? Let me get his name, Jindal. He met with this, this industrialist, Jindal, I think is his name. Anyway, in mid-2024 when he went to India, the bids had been closed off. And then he takes pictures of this man in the, I think at the Prime Minister's residence in the thing, taking a picture with him. And this is after the bids are closed off. And now you extend the bidding period from May the 10th, 2024, when it was closed off, which is what they're saying, to June. What is one supposed to take from that? What is one supposed to take from that? When you look at and you put all those pieces together. And this is what they are saying. They're saying that he's showing, I have it here somewhere, but I'm not able to pick it up. But in any event, what they're saying is that this whole thing with the Petrotrin, they say when the Minister of Energy said no, they've changed the whole process of assessing the bids. But what they did say is that the whole change in the bidding date, let me get it here. This is what it is, and I'll end here with that point. Now, of course, it's Roger saying it as to, of course, we understand, but I am going to say what he did say. This is President General of GTAM, Ansel Roger, has accused the Prime Minister of bias following his official meeting with an Indian businessman who expressed his interest in the Petrotrin refinery. Raouli met Naveen Jindal 2 weeks ago to discuss business prospects of the refinery. It was subsequently revealed to the public that Jindal was allegedly facing corruption and bribery charges from the Indian government. Yes, he is. And only last year he was allowed to leave India. Prime Minister said he was totally unaware. However, Raouli said he was unaware of the charges. But the point is that he said that the he said the process that is currently engaged to select a purchaser for those assets has been closed on May 10, 2024. Up comes last week, the Indian businessman, this is in June, in the diplomatic center, in the face of procurement legislation, in the face of the procedure and the process that is being engaged. And up comes this Indian businessman in display of supreme bias discussing the same aspect with the Prime Minister. I just want to say with the issue with the procurement legislation, the reason why it's not before the procurement regulator is because the regulations, I said it already, 5 of 2016, for the disposal of assets, it cannot be done until the regulations are made, and I think it's 2016, yes, and it's about 8 years now, and they haven't passed the regulations, which is why the procurement regulator is not dealing with the matter. But the point is, the bids, according to what I read, they was closed on May 10th, and in June, up comes this gentleman who has been charged with all kind of corruption. You know, it's not a good look. It's not a good look. So I end with that to say the conversation I had, I used the articles from the newspapers to deal with the issue, and these are all very recent matters, as Sean did say, within the last 2 years, and it's very disturbing, and it does not give one comfort in the ability of the government to operate its governance of the country as it should in a democratic way that we expect from a government such as ours is supposed to represent. So that's my last word on the matter.
And I'll just end, because we have to go on a break, I'll just end by saying that what can be done by one government, once precedent is set, it can be done by others. That's also one of the risks of allowing a bad situation to continue. That at some point we will just see the behavior, the policy decisions, the strategies, the exploitation continue to go towards the lowest common denominator.
And I want to just add to that before you go to the break, because that is really my concern. My concern is almost like you have a child that's giving trouble and you're forgiving them. It'll come a point that you will not have any control. And what it's saying now is the government has become more and more, I don't know, to use our expression, almost bold-faced in what it's doing. And if they're back in government, I am sorry for this country, because if what they're doing now, and they're doing it without regard for how it looks and all of that, can you imagine if what would happen in another 5 years? Well, you've given them you have given them free sheet to do what they want. And that is my concern. It's not to do with any party, it is my interest in the country.
Well, with that said, folks, we'll take a break. When we come back, we open the phone lines. We open up the phone lines. Stay tuned.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
And we're back here on Talking Point Show. Michael Small, Karen, this is Cheryl. We open up the phone lines now. We want to hear from you, the viewer. Just please try to be respectful, even if you are criticizing politicians who might not be here. Please try to keep the conversation respectful and mute your television when you're on the air. With that said, our first caller from San Fernando. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, Karen.
Morning, good morning.
Let me first say, Sean, you owe me an extra minute. I called on Tuesday.
I know.
And you went on, and let me say this, what I wanted to say to you, because of that contribution, because I thought about it the entire Tuesday evening. I was doing some work. And you know what I wanted to say to you about that whole discourse you went on to the end of the program? Bravo, son. Bravo. I was so proud to listen to you on Tuesday. I remembered it all day. Now, that being said, Sean, Karen talked about trust in government. I think what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago is Trinidad and Tobago, we have what we call a representative democracy, right? So what you have is we the people have delegated our authority to these people to run the country on our behalf. But that's not what's happening. What has evolved in Trinidad and Tobago is party politics, where the people that we delegate our authority to have decided that they'd only use our vote to get in there and to do what they want. And what I see happening is what you call runaway government. And when you have runaway government, what you start to see is tyranny. Karen doesn't want to say the word. What you start to see is tyranny. And I think that is what we are starting to see in Trinidad and Tobago, a tyrannical government that is taking form in front of our eyes. And woe be unto us if we don't do something about this. One more thing I have to say, Sean. In Grenada, they had a few young people who never was involved in politics decided that they wanted a change. And they came out there and they won the government, they won the election, and they have started to govern. You need to find 40 other people like yourself, eh? I'm serious about that. Find 40 other people, or 20. Find some. We're going to back you. As I said, I was so proud. The last thing, let me say this last thing. Recently here, the Barbados Prime Minister gave a state address with respect to the crime in Barbados. And because I look at the crime in Barbados, in the island, what is experiencing in Trinidad and Tobago, there's similar things in Barbados, in St. Vincent, and in St. Lucia, in those three places, and at a point in St. Kitts as well. And let me say this. They had this conference with the Hayats, where they say crime is a public health emergency. What it has shown me when I look at all these governments in the region with respect to crime, they are all weak. They are weak governments because to me, there is enough resources in every jurisdiction to deal with this crime, and they are refusing to deal with it in the way that it has to be dealt with. Have a good day, Sean and Karen.
Thank you, caller. We have another caller on the line, Diego Martin. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Small, and to the former Minister of Finance, Mrs. Karen Nunez-Shishera. I want to focus on one of the earlier discourse Mrs. Shishera was focusing on what the government has shown us they're doing. And I have my own analysis of it. And I think that why we are in a collapsing stage or have not collapsed totally is because most of the time the government they are spending it on legislative matter to cover their CYA with some of the alleged corruption that has gone in. That is why they're focusing on that, spending all the time on that. And I point out to two instances. At one hand, negotiation with left hand. International audit on that. Professionals say there is something wrong. There is something wrong. You can't take professional people, just like the accountant at KPMG. You know it's there. Gary acts, and there is no flag for
breaking up. Caller.
Yes, sir.
You're breaking up. I think we're losing too much detail on your contribution.
I will call back. Sorry.
But I think he was dealing with the two issues with the sale of the shares to methanol holding, and he was dealing with the OCM issue. I think that's what I believe, I'm not sure, but I think he was talking about those two things. But anyhow.
Well, Karen, I don't know if you wanted to respond to anything Mr. San Fernando said.
No, I think we on the what he said has a lot of value, and the only thing I will say is I think you need what you need. You want youth. I agree with that, but But you also want experience, and unfortunately, you get experience with it. So I think you need a judicious mix of both. But what you want is integrity and honesty, and a love of country, and that is the most important thing. Age is important. You're seeing it with Biden. Oh my gosh! I mean, it's sad to watch that. It's sad to watch it.
Karen, that would be important, but you need to find the people of experience who are not caught up in the bubble, and you need to find the young people who are not so young that they really don't
have enough
know
experience.
enough. You know, they have enough knowledge / just enough experience. Now we have Claxton on the line. Good morning, caller, you on the air. Caller, good morning. Morning, caller, you on the air.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. Good morning, Mr. You know, it's nice. It's nice to hear we talk about honesty in the government. I mean, that's something what everybody wants. We want honesty. And my thing, Mr. Shara, you is a person who is attorney at law. In this country, you and the president and the law fraternity could come together and start these loopholes that they have with people like Alan Ramblog and Jerry Ramdeen, David Lee, and these people who are being charged. You understand? Sitting in parliament and doing things with these things, they're supposed to be suspended. That's how it's supposed to be. They are supposed to be suspended because I know of a lawyer, an African lawyer, who was charged and never get back his authority to go back to work. So how it is today we seeing these things happening right before our eyes? No, that's not supposed to happen. So we talk about honesty. Yes, that is what we want in the government, and we want it with all the talk show hosts. Thank you.
Right, and we agree with you, but the fact of the matter is I think that we have to focus, well, first of all, I think that my speaking out on both on this channel and another channel, there are very few people that I know, and my family has been against me doing it. They've said, you know, you doing this, you're putting yourself at risk, you're making enemies with people, and I think I have. So I do try to make a contribution as best I can, and that is why I'm glad that I can do it with WSN and with 102 FM in the evening on a Monday. So I do that, but there is also on the government side, there are a few of them that one could say the same thing about, and I'm not going to mention the names. And the same way that they can, but they are the ones governing and they're the ones making the law, because most laws just need a majority, a simple majority, which they have. And they can also change laws so they can do a simple majority, which they have done. So I think you have to be more concerned with the government as well as the opposition and look at what they are doing and see if there are some of them that should not be there.
Okay, I'll have something to say specific to what he just said, but we have Diego Martin back, hopefully with a better connection. Good morning, caller, you're on the air again.
Okay, morning again. The 9376 line something is definitely, because I'm calling you on the same phone with the different number, so I'll have to fix that. So yeah, my earlier intervention basically was that I think the government spends too much of its time covering up on towards behavior, and they're not focusing on what the country needs. Plain and simple, and it's easy to basically look at what they're doing. All the corruption legislation, freedom of information, procurement legislation, you name it, they have mashed it up just to cover themselves. I was focusing on A&V, 3 audits, external audit. All 3 of them can't be wrong. There might be a semblance of some untoward analysis and things. Gary wanted money to investigate that, and they didn't provide it. Look at the Korean matter too. His best friend, you give him a temporary license. If he didn't have a license before, what is the reason for a temporary? That is just to muddle everything and to use the court system to legislate to basically forgive wrongdoing. Okay, my main matter now is the police service. And it's scary, and everybody in this country should understand. We can't move forward until we put pressure on the police to fix itself. It must come from within the police, must come from the leadership of the police. Does the leadership of the police has the wherewithal to do that? We have to transform. If you don't know about and I'm doing something wrong, then heaven help us. And and I'm going to give you 2 basic reasons for I'm saying that. You remember the day of policing? Everybody know those policemen who engage in that, who were wrongful doing. You know, most of them have been promoted, and they're in the hierarchy of the leadership. Identify them, and you will see. Look, yesterday, a guy, my informant, was released when he went to a police station, and they put a gun anything. And you know what you were saying, the police people who he was negotiating with or giving information, they basically are senior officers now. It tells me that they planned that, and the person who was leading the evidence in the court is a senior person, so he couldn't validate the evidence and waste court time, because a lot of eat-a-food lawyers have been given self, and they want them to make money. I go on and have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller.
Oh, I don't know what to say to
We
that.
have Mova on the line that has been waiting. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning to the panel.
Morning.
Concerning patriotic, right? What they were saying is that the bid was already closed, okay, and Scotiabank International supposed to choose the best bid, and then they will put it towards the Parliament, the best bid. But it seems as though that process has been changed with what the Prime Minister has done. The process has been changed, and now they're looking at a different date to go through those bids and to see who win the bid. And I find that is so. If you want to really look at the procurement legislation, the Prime Minister Dr. Rowley is supposed to comply with the legislation in the interest of the nation, and who labored for that manifestation. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, caller. I think I'm not entirely sure if enough of the procurement legislation was enacted or proclaimed or what have you, and it seems as though the refinery is still in a gray area where cabinet makes the decision. I could be wrong about that, but that's what it seems like given the situation.
Yeah, what I did too with the procurement legislation, you needed a special majority. But when they made those amendments, especially the amendment in Section 7, to see what areas were outside the monitoring, etc., of the regulator, they said there was an amendment, and they did it by a simple majority. And so some of the major changes that were made to that procurement legislation, that Section 24 about going to Parliament, they use a simple majority. When to pass the act itself, you needed a special majority. And similarly, they also have delayed passing regulations so that they can tell the country, we passed the Procurement Act, but they have not been able to implement the one that deals with disposal of state lands, as I said already. Since 2018 that was done, and the regulation not passed. Because it's not passed, and because the Central Tenders Board Act has been abolished because of the Procurement Act, therefore, who is going to do it is back to the, it cannot be, I mean, I find it difficult to believe it's by chance. That's all I will say, you know, and that is why the trust issue comes up.
Also, I do wonder what the procurement process would be to allow a contractor to begin quarrying on state lands, because I believe Mr. Warner might be on state lands. I could be wrong about that. But he got a license after he was arrested. That's what we know. We don't know what permission he had before. We just know that he got official documentation after he was charged. Only in Trinidad does this happen, folks. Only in Trinidad.
Is it the same person that gave the Prime Minister
yes,
that huge discount on the property? I mean,
because
so if they call, one of your callers called about calling out names, I'm not defending any of them. I am not going to even, I have not done that. But you have to be balanced in what you're saying.
Well, I will say this, Karen, because one of the callers, he brought up a point that I myself am not sure what the best thing for this is. And that is when a MP has charges against them, should they be allowed to continue being sitting in the House, sitting in the Senate for a senator, because they're part of the legislature. And particularly with the MPs, because MPs were elected in theory, although we know that it's basically what is the symbol, what color you're repping, that's who they'll vote for. But in theory, the people of a constituency voted for this individual who is charged but not convicted.
But you have to be governed by the Constitution. And the
so what does it say?
the Constitution will tell you who would be disqualified from sitting as a member of parliament. I think you have to be a convicted, because just because you charge me, you saw the name with Achille Charles. Achille Charles spent 8.5 years in remand and only to be told that he wasn't even going to be charged. So you can't rush to judge. What you have to see is the process is too long-winded, that you should come, especially with cases like the MPs, that the matters should be heard as quickly as possible.
Because if we leave it to the natural time frame, okay, well, we suspend him temporarily until the case is heard. His office might be over, and more importantly, people who selected him aren't going to be represented by who they're selected.
Yeah, and I don't think you can.
To me, it leaves the window. My fear is, I don't know if this is the correct direction or not. If you suspend MPs who have charges, depending on the charges at the very least, it leaves the window open for that to be exploited. Well, we'll find some dirt on him for the police to charge him with, and even if he doesn't get convicted, they're still down an MP. We could maybe pass a legislation through that we might not be able to pass through, or we get us somebody who we don't want to criticize us in Parliament to contest a bill. We might get him out of the house for a few weeks, and we could do our business.
You'd have to pass legislation to do that. That's a very serious thing, because many people can charge, and when the matter is heard, the evidence does not stand up, and there are all kinds of, there's a lot of lack of trust. So I don't think, and you'd have to have something that allows you to do that.
Right.
And I don't think we have anything like that.
My point is, I don't want to see it happen, because I think it would be used for bad things. Right? That would be my fear.
Bad things, I like that.
People might say, oh, we want to get these David Lee and all of these other people in the UNT.
But there are people on the other side.
It could go the other way too. It could go the other way too.
Yeah, people on the other side too. So
we have St. James on the line. Last caller for the morning. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Caller, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, how are you doing? Listen, a word of advice to Karen. She mentioned that her family, warning her about things. I don't know if she remembers Jean Miles.
Yes, I do remember.
It was under the same TNM, I think that, so be careful. That's
Thank you.
The simple majority, 2/3 and 3/5, and I don't know who determines that and when is it determined.
Okay, well,
by who?
Okay, well, it's by the law, and the 3/5 majority is required where you're dealing with a person's rights under Section 4 in particular, which talks about your right of expression, etc. So it's not. So some pieces of legislation can affect those rights, and if it does do that, then it requires a 3/5 majority. But then I don't want to go into the whole law of it, but that's a major consideration. That's how it's done. So, for example, with the Revenue Authority, they removed the provisions that required a 3/5 majority, and of course diluted the law, and so that's one of the considerations. But that's not the end of it. You could get the 3/5 majority. And there's Section 13 of the Constitution that does say that even if you get the 3/5 majority, it is still it is subject to whether that act, even though you got the requisite majority, is an act that shows a respect for a country, a respect for the laws and the rights and freedoms of individuals. So it still can be challenged. So that is basically how you go from a simple to a special.
Caller, are you there?
I don't think so, but I think I answered this question.
All right. Well, yeah, the caller's last. Well, so, like to thank all of our callers for calling in, expressing their sentiments. It's going to be a trickier time, I think, moving forward as we get closer and closer to the election. Although the results might be what we expect it to be, which is to say, regardless of which party wins, PNM or UNC, assuming one of those two parties wins, it might end up being a very typical election. The lead up to it, I still think, at least I would hope, people will become more involved, more aware, more concerned, more engaged. And perhaps we might see something different now, because to what extent should we still continue going on this road, business as usual, you know, same old, and hope for the best, but still history says we keep getting worse. Karen, of course, thank you for joining me once again.
You're welcome. I'm very happy to do so. And I want to add my voice. I don't watch the show all the time. You know, I have, well, whatever my reasons may be. But clearly, Mr. Ann Fernando, who is one of the critics, what do you call it, the critics, that I do respect his point of view. And I was so happy to hear him give you that, you know, give you those words of encouragement and words of commendation, which I know you deserve, because you work very hard for this station.
I mean, I know he didn't
and
necessarily...
so does Keaton.
Yes, I know he didn't necessarily mean himself or people of his generation, but he as a professional with his experience is a good example of, I think, what we're missing. And I've heard it from another colleague Janelle John Bates, a young attorney, Karen, in her mid-30s, who basically say all of young professionals she knows, whichever profession it may be, none of them want to be involved in politics. None of them in their early 40s, mid-30s. And I hear similar things with regards to people in their early 20s who are the young, bright academics of the nation who are in youth parliament. And I'm not entirely sure. It's funny how in other parts of the world, young people might be too involved in political issues and too caught up in advocacy and activism. But in TNT, outside of what we import, with regards to our own actual homegrown issues, we kind of seem to be oblivious from a young age. I'm not entirely sure how that needs to be changed. I don't know if it's a deficiency in our education system, but I do fear that it is something that it's like succession planning. If you don't have the up-and-comers coming in, the good ones anyway, good people up-and-coming coming in, why will we then be surprised that we have kind of average level blokes?
But I have to say though, look at America. I mean, if you want to criticize, that is the symbol of democracy. And you have
that is a whole different level of creep.
I mean, you know what I'm saying, you know, you want to know how could they have, you know, and I listened to one of the international stations, and they said they didn't, you know, this whole blew back on Biden. And they said they don't blame Biden, they blame the Democratic Democratic Party, because 4 years ago there was concern about him even going up another term, and they should have dealt with it. So, you know, there's value to what the gentleman is saying, and what we're saying is, I am saying anyhow, you need a good mix of both, and what you need is succession planning when you have that mix, so that you're not holding on, but you're passing on the torch.
That's a good point, to bring that back. It's not that we have seen some examples where a lack of experience has caused some oopsies, let's just put it that way. So we can't just throw experience out of the water. And I guess it just goes to show there's no one way to do it. You need the variety of perspectives and the respect to then figure out how to compromise and integrate those perspectives together. So we'll leave there at that point, folks. Democracy is not an individual sport, it's a team sport. And with that said, we could make today a good day for each other, for whoever you may run into today. We have to at least try to do so, try our best to do so. I'll encourage you, as my co-host always would when he's here. Remember your allegiance to our twin island republic. I mean, even as an island nation, we cannot go it solo. We will see you tomorrow. Stay safe. Bye-bye.